Hello, everybody. Welcome back to English Champion. This is our 75th episode. There's a lot of data that show that 90% of people who do podcasts and create these kinds of videos never make it past 20. So 75, and we're not stopping. We're keeping going. So I hope you can go back and if you're new to the channel, you can go back and listen to some of my older stuff. But I talk a lot about big education ideas. Stuff with universities, sometimes stuff with K through 12, stuff with how the functioning of universities actually operates, and a little behind the scenes stuff, some stuff with grading, some stuff with policy. There's all sorts of things I talk about. The last couple episodes, I've been specifically talking about literature. And today I'm going to talk about writing. So as an English professor for many, many, many years, those are the things I talk about. Big education ideas, classroom, how to teach things, specific literary things, and in today's case, some specific writing ideas. So if you are a teacher of writing, if you are a parent who's trying to help your kid become a better writer in school, or if you're a student yourself, this episode is for you. So I hope you get something valuable out of this. What I'm going to talk about is the idea of paragraph structure and how it relates to an entire article, or in school cases, an essay. With the rise of AI, the idea of being able to write on our own is becoming more difficult. Young people are turning to those AI tools much more often, and they are losing not only the practice themselves of how to communicate better, but also the purpose of what traditional writing structure offers, because the AI models tend to change writing in a way that isn't very human. And it actually skips over some things that are very important to our brains for when we read. And so if you're a good writer, you can communicate better with your audience than the AI platforms can. And so the reason I wanted to talk about this was I came across an article the other day, or recently, by another English professor. And I really like her stuff. She's very bright, and she kind of does what I do. She talks a lot about kind of big education topics, but then also some specific things that relate to English. And she's talking in her article about paragraph writing and the problems that occur when AI produces articles or essays, and what gets lost in paragraph structure that really gets in the way of reader comprehension, or just a trust between the author, the student, and the reader of that article or essay. However, while her article is quite good, she actually doesn't go far enough with it. Her title, which is very funny, is For the Love of God, Learn to Paragraph. All right, so funny title, except when she says learn to paragraph, she doesn't actually help us do that. And so we're left wondering, like, well, okay, you want us to learn to paragraph so badly, so how are we supposed to do that? And part of this might go to, it's a little difficult to tell who her audience is for this article. She's writing about, again, the integration of AI with writing, and LLMs specifically, and how it produces language in written form. But like, I already know all this. So if it sounds like through the article, she's writing for people who are a bit more knowledgeable, a bit more experienced. She references a number of quite complicated research studies. Some of the language she uses here is quite jargony. So this seems to be for an elevated audience. But for those of us who are that elevated audience, a fellow English teacher, like, I already know all this stuff. So who exactly is this for? If you're writing for other people who aren't experts at this, like we English teachers, if you're using AI already, like, why would you change? I don't know if this is super convincing for people who are already out of school and who do their writing through AI and are kind of already addicted to using those platforms. I don't know if this would reach them. Maybe that's who she's writing for. It's hard to tell. But the people who need to hear this the most are students. And yet the writing here is not for students. Like, you can just tell this isn't something high school or college students would really grapple with very well. And so the idea of learning to paragraph, well, let's do that. Let's teach these people how to do it. Well, she doesn't really do that. And kind of the extent that she goes to is, well, it just takes practice. It's like, okay, but what are you practicing specifically? How do you practice this? Well, she never really says. And so what I'm going to do is, her article is fine. I'm not criticizing her work here. I'm just adding to it that this could be a bit clearer, and we can actually go further and better with this in getting, especially young people, to actually do this paragraph process correctly so that their communication is better. And I've been doing this for many, many years, and I have a very simple method for it. And I've talked about it in other videos I've made. I've written articles about it. I'll link to all of those. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through just a little bit of her essay, and I'm going to show you that she actually already does, because she's an expert, just like those of us who are English teachers should be. She already does what I'm going to explain. She just doesn't point it out for people. And so I'm going to just make it way more obvious so that it's a lot more helpful, especially for those people who need it the most, which is young people, young writers, students who aren't experts at this. And so I'm going to walk you through just a little bit of her essay to point out, here's where this is strongest, and here's the technique she's using, because she's not explicit about how she does this, but she actually does it. And so I'm going to help her show her own work, that it's a model you can follow. And it follows exactly with how I teach writing and how I get students to become stronger paragraph writers. I'm also going to show you just an example of my own writing, just to show you that, like, yeah, I do this too. So this is what English people do. And sometimes maybe there's something that happens with people who are experts is they don't always fully explain things because they think it might be obvious to people. And so you just sort of assume that, well, everyone's going to know what I'm talking about. And especially for young people, high school or college students, yeah, they don't know what you're talking about. It's over their head. It's too complicated. And so you got to break it down very simply and actually show them what exactly you're doing. And she does a great job of it. I'm just going to do the showing part. I'm going to help her out with this. So when we're talking about paragraphs, before I put her article and my article up on the screen, when we're talking about paragraphs, there's a little pattern you can follow, and it's very easy. That's going to be right up here. It actually is the same pattern that we implement for an entire piece. All right. So in academic contexts, this is, what an essay should do. All right. What we need to be doing as writers is understanding what our readers' brains are doing when they're reading our work. So if we want someone to read our essay at school, we need to be thinking, well, what is my reader actually looking for? It's helpful to pick out an audience and go, okay, I'm writing for these types of people. I'm writing for fellow college students. I'm writing for scholars. I'm writing for, the people in my neighborhood, like general population people. Like, you need to pick out an audience, but even more than that, what's more helpful is to think, well, what's going on in those people's brains when they're reading, in this case, an essay? And they're looking for three things, okay? Whenever we pick up a piece of text, especially something that's kind of expository, like an essay, our brains are automatically looking for three things. And I call them the three Ps. First thing they're looking for is the point of the whole thing. What is this about? What's the point of all of this? All right. And you can kind of guess, well, that's what the thesis is. And so we can identify that fairly early in the piece, and it's going to be defended throughout the piece. So the first P that readers are looking for is, well, what's the point of all this? The second P that readers are looking for is proof. They want to know, how do you know that? So the first P, point, answers a what question. Readers are always thinking, what am I reading about here? What's the point of this? The second question is a how question. So they're asking, how do you know that? Where's your proof? What's in here that I can trust you? What's your evidence? What's your background information? So they're asking a what question, what's the point? And they're asking a how question. How do you know that? What's your proof? This is all your evidence and your argumentation. And the third thing they're looking for, the third P, is purpose. And that answers a why question. Why should I care about any of this? And so what an essay should do, and I don't think it's just academics. I think if you're writing any sort of, an op-ed piece for in a journalism environment, you definitely for scholarly, I think of it when I write scholarly work, it's always the same. What's my reader looking for? How are they going to trust me? What's my proof? And then why should they care about what I've written? What's the purpose of all of this? How can they use this in their life? How does this help them expand their knowledge or convince them to take some sort of action? Why does this matter? So those are the three questions, and I've kind of made them all Ps. So the three Ps: point, proof, purpose. You could also include a fourth P. When I'm teaching, I sometimes talk about this as well. So I'll have a fourth one here, and I put it in parentheses because you don't always have to focus on it, but it does help in the writing organization process, which is a pivot. And these are transitions. These are little phrase cues that link one idea to another. So point, proof, purpose, and we often include some pivots in there too, where we go, okay, I was just talking about this. Now I'm going to talk about this. So we do this as readers at the essay level. Okay? Whenever I pick up an article, that's what I'm looking for. What are you telling me? How do you know that? Why should I care? All right? However, those three questions can also be answered throughout the paper in individual paragraphs. And so that's where, when she says, for the love of God, please learn to paragraph, this is what we need to be getting to is, okay, well, what does a good paragraph actually look like? Yes, it builds to the whole. Yeah, it provides our evidence and our arguments. Okay, but how do you do that exactly? Well, you actually follow the same little pattern. It's not every single paragraph because sometimes, especially as you get better at this, paragraphs can have slightly different functions regarding voice, tone, transitions, things like that. So maybe not every paragraph is like this, but for students, we should try to get them to write every paragraph like this in an academic context. So every paragraph also makes a point. It also has some proof in it, and it also points to a purpose. It answers, what is this paragraph about? How do you know that information? Why should I care about this paragraph? Those three questions are always in readers' minds. And so when we're writing these paragraphs, that's what we have to do. So when we do them as a whole for the whole essay, well, you break it down as, let's say you're writing a student in a high school or college class, writing a 1,000-word essay. In my classes, a 1,000-word essay tended to be about 7 paragraphs. Okay. So it's very easy. You go, well, the first paragraph is kind of your point. What's your what? What's this about? That's where your thesis is. Maybe the middle 5 are your how. This is all your evidence and your background and your argumentation. And then the final paragraph is your why. Why does this matter? What's the big purpose of all this? Why should I care? All right. So you can kind of do a little math formula for it as well. But whatever your length is that you're aiming at, that's what the whole essay should do. What, how, why? Point, proof, purpose. But as I said, within the essay, it's not just the whole 1,000 words. Every paragraph, or at least most of them, should also follow the same format where you're providing a point. That's a topic sentence, usually, as you learned from elementary school. What's this topic about? There's some evidence and explanation. That's your proof. And then oftentimes it ends up with, well, here's why this paragraph mattered for the whole essay. So the whole essay does it, and each paragraph does it. And so the author here, she does a great job of explaining why paragraphs are important, and the further argument is why LLMs are so bad at writing paragraphs. But she never explains, well, how do we fix this? And so that's what I want to show you. And the way we fix it is actually what she already does. She just doesn't explain it enough. And so that's what I'm going to do to help her out. So let me pull up her article, and we'll walk through just a few examples, and we'll take a look at what she does really well and what young writers should be following in their own writing. So let's take a look at that. All right, so here's her article. This is a very good Substack if you want to go check it out. Lots of good articles on there. So as I said, she's a professional, so she knows what she's doing. She explains, she lays out her argument exactly as I described, which is, the beginning has her what's this all about? The middle has a bunch of explanation and argumentation. And then the conclusion down here shows why does all of this matter? And so that's what the whole paper does. But even within the article, she does the very same thing. And this is what students need to learn from. All right. So instead of just saying, well, we need to practice good paragraphs. Well, let's use this article as a model for what good paragraphs tend to look like. So here's an example. All right. This paragraph right here. Strong paragraphs are essential for making strong arguments, for lodging ideas in a reader's memory. Paragraphs are bricks. Each one has to hold together internally and bear weight in relation to the ones around it. If you can't remember something you just read, it was likely a motley pile. LLMs have difficulty generating coherent paragraphs for reasons I'll explain below. LLMs will litter their prose with bold and italicized phrases, bullets, and one sentence per line formatting to disguise weak paragraphs. All right, so what's the point of this little section? Well, that strong paragraphs, are closely correlated to strong arguments. All right. How do you know that? Well, they're like bricks, and they have to bear weight, and it helps you remember things. So here's the middle section is the proof part. How does she know? Well, she's explaining some of those things. Why does this matter? Because if you resort to LLMs, they have difficulty generating coherence for people, and they litter their prose with things that are actually making paragraphs weaker. Okay, so there's the why. Why does this matter? Why does it matter if I use LLMs for writing instead of coming up with my own ideas and own paragraphs? Well, because if you do, your work is going to be littered with this kinds of bad stuff that is doesn't help with the coherence of your article. All right. That's an important why. There's a danger involved. All right. So she's doing exactly what I described. The whole paper does it, but also most of the individual paragraphs do it. Here's her point. Here's her proof. Here's her purpose. So every paragraph has its own structure. So here's another great paragraph. I think about paragraphs from the perspective of a writer who wants to serve her reader quality prose. An economist might characterize paragraphing as a coordination game. Two agents with partially aligned interests need to converge on the same interpretation of a structure. Conventions like paragraph breaks, headings, bullets, and typographic cues function as a signaling channel. A writer has an intended discourse plan involving units, how each relates to the next, where shifts occur, what should be foregrounded, and what should be treated as support. The reader must infer that plan from the surface cues under time and attention constraints. Both parties benefit when the reader can reconstruct the writer's intended segmentation with low friction, because the writer's communicative goal gets achieved and the reader expends less interpretive work. All right, so it's kind of a mouthful there, but her structure is exactly right. What's the point of this paragraph? Well, we should probably think about writing as serving a reader. All right, I'm here to serve you, give you what you want. And part of that serving is anticipate the questions they're going to have. Remember, what's the first question a reader has? What's the point of this? Well, that's how she starts this paragraph. It's how she started the whole paper, but she's also starting this paragraph. Next question. How do you know? Well, here's her evidence. Here's her arguments that demonstrate she knows what she's talking about. Well, why does this matter? Because both parties benefit when the reader can reconstruct the writer's intended segmentation, and the writer's goal gets achieved, and the reader expends less interpretive work. All right? So why does this matter? Because both parties benefit. The writer benefits and the reader benefits. They're working together to accomplish this goal of learning something in written form. All right? So within each paragraph, she does a great job of explaining the what, the how, and the why of writing. The whole article does it, and almost all of the paragraphs do it as well. So let's just find another one. So why are LLMs bad at paraphrasing? Okay, so she's anticipating you might, as a reader, be having this question, right? You said humans do a better job of this than LLMs. Well, why are LLMs so bad? Well, so she's going to give us a list, first, second, third. So first, there is no local equilibrium. So there's her first point. She gives a little more explanation about it. Well, why does this matter that there's no local equilibrium? Because it basically ruins readers' expectations and puts them at the mercy of an LLM that has been reinforced to mimic surface-level coherence. All right? It doesn't go deeply enough. It's not clear enough. That's the real problem. All right? So if you want to be a good writer and you're relying on LLMs, just know that they're not specific enough, and they're not aligning with the reader's expectations. All right? So that's a problem. Your writing is going to be weaker. So that's the why. So here's the what, here's the how, here's the why. Just skim ahead some more. The third one, an LLM's training signal strongly rewards locally plausible continuation and offers only weak guidance about where a paragraph should begin or end. LLMs are optimized to predict the next token from preceding tokens. I don't know what a token is. Again, there's a lot of like jargony stuff here, which I'm not quite sure whom she's writing this for, because students wouldn't know what any of this means. So, and if you're a professional writer, like, you can already do this. So I'm not sure who she's convincing with some of this terminology, other than to make it look more scholarly. But again, as I said, we can make this way easier. Just follow her format of writing that she already does, and that would be even more helpful than what she's explaining. Follow her writing process here, because the beginning is the what, which is basically that the LLMs just have predictive models to anticipate what the next word or sentence or idea is going to be. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the most coherent. It doesn't necessarily mean it fits best with what broader argument you're making. So the locally plausible continuation, that's her point here. How does she know all this? Well, she talks about, the patterns and paragraph breaks and all that stuff. Why does this matter? The result is paragraphing that often reads as plausible in the moment, but it's weakly anchored to the overall structure. So there's the real problem, is when you see an LLM spit out some writing, you go, oh, I think that's pretty good. Like, it kind of flows. But then when you read it more carefully, or when a reader who's asking deeper questions reads that work, we go, yeah, this doesn't seem to fit very smoothly or coherently with the rest of the overall structure of the argument. So there's those disconnects there. So that's the problem. If you want your reader to fully understand you and follow your argument more clearly, well, the LLMs really don't do a good job of that. So again, from a writing structure standpoint, from a paragraph construction standpoint, she actually tells you how to do it, or she doesn't tell you, she shows you how to do it. It's just up to you to figure that out. Many people won't. That's why I'm trying to help you here. So even though she never says, here is the proper way to write a paragraph, she actually does do it. And that's why, again, for those that would miss it, that's why I'm pointing it out. So she gives a couple of examples of the bullet point stuff that here's what LLMs do. Let's just skim ahead and see another paragraph. Writers also know it takes practice to craft good paragraphs. First drafts are rarely perfect. The point of revision is to fix things like weak paragraphs. All right, so the practice of crafting, that's her point. Like you got to work on this. Now, again, she doesn't tell you how. That's what I'm helping you with. But that's her main point, and it's a correct one. An essay or story might be written in bits and pieces over time. Afterward, you read it in its entirety and ask, does this break serve the argument? Should I combine these paragraphs, split this big paragraph up? It turns out that good paragraphing is a global task best performed on already produced material. Default LLM generation does not include an explicit revision phase. LLMs give a first draft surface segmentation without any post hoc alignment. So again, some big words there. But her point is here. Her proof is here. And why does all this matter? Because there isn't good revision that goes on. It's surface level. It doesn't take the time to reflect back on what it created and then how that could actually sound better. That's what humans need to do. So again, great paragraph following the format that I've described before. 3 Ps, it works pretty much every time. All right. So lastly, just go to her conclusion. Remember, the conclusion of a paper should be the ultimate why point, because we've given the point, the broader point up front. The whole middle, the whole body of the essay has been the proof. And now we're tying it all together going, here's why I told you all that stuff. And here's why it matters for you. You should listen because this will help you in some way. So what does she say? Fortunately, everyone benefits from strong paragraphs. So there's her big point. Strong paragraphs are the key to good writing, right? If you're using an LLM to draft prose, understand that default generation will not result in strong paragraphs. And she gives some, if you want to use LLM, here's how you could use it better. So there's some proof of why LLMs are weaker and you need to help it. You can't just say, write this paper for me and expect that it's going to spit out perfect. If you're going to use it, you need to implement some other techniques here. Why does all this matter? Treat every paragraph break as a promise to the reader that at length you have their understanding in mind. Why does all this matter? Because you're trying to make a promise to your reader. You're trying to say, I respect your time. I want to give you valuable information, and I want you to be able to clearly understand me. Because if I confuse you along the way, then this has all been a waste of time because you're not going to like what I wrote. So that's why I need to write these good paragraphs, because I need to fulfill that promise. And why is that promise important? Because it shows that I have their understanding in mind. I'm caring about them. I didn't just write this to make myself look good. I didn't just write this because my teacher told me. I didn't just write this to get another publication under my belt and just to kind of go through it in a perfunctory way, not caring about my audience. No. The whole point of of written communication is I have something valuable to tell you. So I'm going to lay it out. I'm going to design it and structure it in a way that makes it the content valuable, but also the method by which you're reading it actually understandable and useful and heck, maybe even enjoyable for you. I want you to kind of like reading this. So that's what she does. And she does a very good job of it. I wish she would just explain, here's how you make these paragraphs better. But she does lay out the contrast of why LLMs don't do a good job of this. And she's exactly right. So again, I'm not trying to critique her work. She's a scholar. You know, we're both English professors. So we're pros at this. But I think just for maximum utility, I think the audience that would best, learn from this is young people. And for those young people, we got to explicitly tell them, yeah, you need to practice paragraphs, but here's how you actually go about doing that. So there's just an example from this other scholar that is really great using those 3 Ps. All right, so here's an article I wrote a long time ago for my own Substack. And I follow the exact same format throughout the whole piece, that there is a point at the beginning, there's proof in the middle, and there's purpose at the end. But not just the whole essay has to be structured that way. Each paragraph tends to also be structured that way. So let me just point out a couple to show you that this isn't, I don't just teach this. I actually do this myself. And when you get to be an expert at this, like, you just kind of do it naturally, because again, this is how people's brains work. This is what they want to know. And so that's what I'm going to give them. And the structure of each paragraph does that. So, this essay is about how to be educated. And I say that being educated really means actually having perspective. That's the key element. So the essay is about, well, what does perspective mean? So let me just jump to kind of my thesis idea here, and I'll show you how right from the start I am using my 3P method from the beginning. So let's take a quick look here. But I rarely hear a word, we're talking about educated, but I rarely hear a word that I think encapsulates the meaning of this tricky idea of being educated. To be fair to the ideas I just mentioned, it's a combination of all of those concepts. The key word is perspective. So I'm saying that the word perspective is the link between all these different versions of what people think the word educated means. A truly educated person has perspective. So what's perspective then? Having perspective does mean that you have to possess some factual knowledge. You also have to have some skills. It means you have to have some diversity in your thinking, that you can't just consider one domain or one method of analysis, and often means you need some awareness of how people have been affected and will continue to be affected. Perspective helps us avoid reacting to our world purely out of emotion. It helps us discern whom we should be listening to. It helps us formulate plans of action. It helps us think about people and time. So again, up here is our point. In the middle is the proof. Like, you kind of have to do all of this. Here's what all of this actually means. Why does this matter? Well, it helps us in 4 different ways. Helps us avoid reacting out of emotion. Helps us figure out who we should listen to. Helps us make plans for action. Helps us think about people across time. All right, so that's the why. Why does this matter? Because it can help you do all of these things. All right, so my 4th P, pivot, happens at the very end here, because what's my next paragraph about? Well, it's kind of about people and time. And so that's how the next paragraph goes. Let's look for those 3 Ps again. One of the most successful economics books ever written, Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt, says the most important thing a person can do is constantly consider how his or her plans might affect not just a particular group of people, but all people, and how those plans might work not just in the short term, but in the long term. So people and time. If we haven't carefully considered those angles, we will have a high likelihood of pursuing something dangerous. This is perspective. So again, what's the key idea? Well, if I'm going to define perspective for you, part of that definition can be found if you take to heart the ideas in this very famous book. Well, what's in that book? Well, here are the key ideas. Here's how I know this. And then why does this matter? Because if we don't think about those things, we can get ourselves into trouble. We can pursue something dangerous. That's the why. Why does this matter? We need to understand this so that we can have a better life or avoid disaster. Here's another paragraph, very short, but watch, I still do all 3 things in this paragraph. The origin of the word perspective has to do with vision. The origin for wisdom in many languages is also related to words meaning to see. The verbs to see and to know have a lot of linguistic ancestry in common. So being educated, having perspective and wisdom, is connected to the ability to see the world in very important ways. All right, so here's kind of a new idea, because I'm moving through the paper. And so I need a topic idea, a topic sentence. This is my P, my first point. And I say, well, this idea of perspective has to do with vision. And then I make a connection. How do I know that vision is important for this perspective idea? Well, it's connected to wisdom. So perspective and wisdom, seeing and knowing, are very similar. So why does this matter? Because being educated is the ability to see the world in important ways. If you want to see the world properly and then understand it and then live properly, well, that's the why. that matters. So I put that right in the paper. One more paragraph. In art, those who, because again, I gotta give my proof, and so I need some examples. This is the body of my essay. So what's another way of thinking about this? Well, what about art? I just gave an economics book example. In art, we do this too. In art, those who create perspective in their drawings are presenting images from a particular point of view, but a gifted artist also presents those images in proper relationships with the other images in the piece. Similarly, we go through our lives operating from our own point of view, and it's unique to each of us, obviously, but it's not good to go through life distorting everything else around us. It will become confusing for us, but it also is confusing for others who we have to communicate with. If you cannot consider perspective in terms of our fellow human beings and across time and space, our world becomes a distorted mess. We have to understand proper relationships so we can make sense of the world. All right. So what's my first P? What's the point of this paragraph? Well, we use perspective in art, and in pieces of art that don't use perspective, it's a big mess. You don't understand what you're looking at. So we already do this in art. How do I know? Well, we can take that art example and compare it to our real life that, well, just like in art, things get distorted. Well, things can get distorted in reality too. Why does this matter? Because if we don't, everything's going to become a mess, and we won't be able to function and make sense of our world unless we understand these relationships. That's perspective. So again, every paragraph pretty much I follow my 3Ps. The whole essay follows the 3Ps, and each paragraph follows the 3Ps. So when we say we need people to write better paragraphs, this is what we're talking about. There has to be a bit of a methodology, a bit of a format to it. It's kind of a little math equation. And if you just follow it, it's not like you're being so technical that, it's just a kind of a fill in the blank or color by number or something like that. Like, there's a reason we're doing this, is because, as I said before, this is what your brain already wants to do. This is what readers' brains are looking for. So you might as well give it to them and put it in a paragraph form. So these paragraphs are so important because, yes, they are the building blocks of our whole essay, but even within the whole essay, they each kind of have to stand alone as its own functional constructed unit. And the way you build that structure is my 3P method. So, again, I used another scholar's example. Here's how I write. Each of these paragraphs does those things, at least for the most part. And as you get older and better, you can manipulate that a bit, and maybe you do it across 2 paragraphs, and you don't cram all of it into 1 paragraph, but you can mess around with it. But even those of us who are professionals who have written thousands and thousands and thousands of articles and essays, yeah, even we do this. So you might as well just follow the model, because this is what works. And the reason it works is because we're trying to help people already use what their brain is trying to do. So here's an example that I've written, and I do this in most of my articles I write. So those are a couple of articles, one from this other scholar, one from me, where we're both doing the same thing. Why? Because we're experts at this, and we've had years and years of practice in publishing to do this the proper way. But it's actually very easy to teach to young people. If you just follow my simple formula, the 3Ps, how they're always answering questions that readers have, then anyone can do this. And so what we just need to do as teachers or as authors is just be much more specific and clear about what we want people to do. And again, the other scholar's article kind of just says, well, you just need to practice. Like, yeah, but what are you practicing exactly? Well, that's what I've pointed out for you here today. So go take a look at her whole article. It's quite good. And notice as you read it how often she implements the 3Ps in her specific paragraphs, and how then the whole paper uses those 3Ps. And you can look at mine as a model as well. But I'm also going to link below to the some videos I've made, as well as just other places I've written about my 3P explanation. So use those with your students, use them with your kids. If you are a student, start using that 3P method, because your writing will improve greatly. You'll be able to understand what your reader is looking for, and be able to, as she wrote, be able to serve them better. And that's what everyone wants. When they pick up your essay or your article, they want to make sure that you're thinking about them, and that you're answering the questions they already have going on in their minds, and so that they can get something important out of it. So that's what good writing looks like. And it's very easy to do. Use my 3Ps. I look forward to hearing how it goes for you. Thanks for watching. See you next time.